Right now, the push for an Israeli-Palestinian ceasefire is pretty global. The UN has taken up a debate on the issue, and diplomats have even descended physically on the region. As we speak, the Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu is meeting with members of his security cabinet to discuss the situation. These are images from today. And also today, Jordan's royal court released a statement saying that U.S. Vice President Kamala Harris called King Abdullah to discuss the tensions. With me now is someone who's been through this process many times before. Naصر Judeh is a former Jordanian foreign minister and deputy prime minister, currently a Jordanian Senate member. Thanks, Naصر Judeh, for being with us. What are you hearing about a possible ceasefire agreement between Hamas and Israel? The Israeli press is reporting that the Israelis have notified the Egyptians that something has been agreed. Are you hearing anything?
I'm hearing what you're hearing, Halla, and we're all waiting for a cessation of hostilities, for a ceasefire. But I'm praying, like millions around the world, and particularly in this region, that this is not just going to be another ceasefire with Israel getting away with what it has done. And Ben Wiedemann, a veteran reporter and journalist who has covered this region for decades, said it all in words and in images. I'm hoping that the root causes will be addressed, rather than Israel getting away and calling it a wrap and saying our work is done here and we move on and hope to get away with it again. It cannot happen. The root causes have to be addressed.
But it doesn't sound like those are being addressed. It sounds like potentially this will simply lead to a cessation of hostilities and not tackle some of those very important issues that lead time and again to a cycle of violence that renews itself over and over every few years.
That is exactly my point, Halla. We've seen Gaza 2008, 2009, Gaza 2012, Gaza 2014, and in between skirmishes and raids and whatnot. So I'm hoping that this is not one of those to be continued. This is a horror movie that we've all watched before, 4 times during my tenure as foreign minister. So I hope this is not one of the to be continued or a horror movie with another sequel to come in the future. The root causes have to be addressed, and what I mean by the root causes is the end of occupation, the end of subjugation, the end of what is essentially apartheid. This is not acceptable in today's world.
Take us behind the scenes. You've been part of this process before. I mean, if Hamas and Israel are notifying the Egyptians that they've come to some sort of agreement, how do they communicate? How does this work exactly? Because there's no direct talk between the two.
Well, the Egyptian envoys have been on the go, and there have been channels. But Halla, I mean, let me take you back, if I may. Regardless of how the communication channels operate, and regardless of the outcome of these talks, and hopefully there will be an end of the air raids and the bombardment and the violence and the death and the destruction that we saw in Ben Wiedemann's report. I mean, I don't need to go over the details again. They're horrific. The Secretary General of the United Nations today said he was horrified that 10 members of the same family were killed in one air raid. Schools have been bombed, hospitals have been bombed, clinics have been bombed. So this has to stop. You have to address the root causes of this. And the root cause of this entire problem is occupation and the need to go back to a negotiating table where an independent Palestinian state is established, and peace and security for all the peoples of the region. Again,
of course, I understand your point here, but this all started before Hamas started firing rockets. It started with the storming of the Al-Aqsa Mosque. It started with a heavy-handed, according to many, reaction to protests against forced evictions in East Jerusalem. Then Hamas, of course, opportunistically took advantage of the whole situation and started firing rockets. Hamas is doing a tremendous disservice to its own people, isn't it? Because the world wasn't at all focused on Gaza until Hamas started firing rockets. People were actually paying attention to some of these issues that you're bringing up.
Well, Halla, every time there is an escalation or a flare-up in this part of the world, we get into the symptoms rather than the causes, and we get into the polarization of the narrative. and we're going to end this escalation, hopefully, and end the death and destruction, and then we're going to go back to the drawing board. We shouldn't go back to the drawing board. We have to go back to serious negotiations. You said it right. What started this was not rockets being fired at Israel. What started this is actually, even before the storming of Al-Aqsa Mosque, what started this was harassment of Christian worshippers during Holy Week, from Palm Sunday to Easter Sunday, the storming of Al-Aqsa Mosque.
I guess, Nasser, if I can just jump in, I'm sorry to interrupt. If I can just jump in, Hamas is hijacking what was a substantive discussion about Palestinian rights. So there is a lot of blame to go around here. Do you accept that?
No, I accept that there's a root cause of the problem that has to be addressed, Halla. Yeah. I mean, again, I'm going to get into who started what, because at the end of the day, you're talking about an ongoing occupation for more than 60 years. I mean, this is and a problem that's been there for almost 100 years. So, you know, we have to accept the fact that there has to be an independent Palestinian state. The Palestinians need their dignity, so that we look at the whole picture rather than just symptoms. You go to a medical doctor to seek attention, and if he says, well, look, you know, I'll give you something to reduce and subside the flare-up this time, but come back to me every time there's another flare-up, that doesn't work. Address the root cause of the problem. That's what I'm talking about. Who hijacks what is again the polarization of the narrative.
Yeah. Nassir Judeh, thanks very much, a former foreign minister and a Senate member, speaking to us live from... You're in Amman, correct? Just want to make sure you're in... You are, okay. Have a good evening. Thanks for joining us.